Everybody, welcome to the AI Space Podcast. AI isn't just the future. It's a force rewriting the rules of business, wealth creation, society. If you're a founder, builder, technologist, innovator, investor, this is the AI show for you. The question if you ask yourself, are you going to blaze a path, just stand around, or be left in the dust? Wow, this is the first live episode coming from Dallas, Texas. We got a live studio audience here. Let's give it a clap. Awesome. It's 2026, and what we promised is to talk about AI market outlook and playbook. So guys, we have a lot to accomplish. We have about 45 minutes this panel discussion. We have to give practical insights, no theory, something that's real. So I'm going to start off. What do you see, Dan, what do you see as the key trends in AI going into 2026?
Well, the key trend, really this year is about delivering the outcome, right? How do we deliver the outcome? And software, service as a software would be the key, right? It's about switching from typical traditional service, SaaS, software as a service model into more outcome-based, which is service as a software model. And we can talk more on that as well. So,
Jake, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm right lock in step with Dan here. It is about outcomes. It's about even at the smallest levels of the AI agents themselves. It's no longer the chat feature. It is the pure execution of the chat or of the agentic system. So it's the failure radius, the zone around failure of those AI agents. But then if you had to just look at all of 2026, it's about precision. So there are so many groups out there at the largest level of investing and then intermingle of the founders. We have to be precise. We have to be driving what those particular pain points that we have from a customer or from a client, and then how are we delivering the best? And then from an investor standpoint, are we evaluating, are we underwriting that specifically? And then are we trusting that that is going to be able to go out in the market and capture as much as what your addressable is right now? So it's precision.
And Steve?
I think it's definitely about outcomes. There's no doubt about that. I think it's also about experience and experiences, right? So I'm looking at infusing experience into outcomes. If you think about traditional e-com as an example, it's not necessarily just about browsing a website with thousands of products and trying to configure a shopping cart. It's more around how do you curate a conversation? How do you set that narrative arc and deliver a really unique experience that's bespoke and completely independent of anything you would see right now on an e-com site? So it is definitely about outcomes. It's how do you take and craft that experience and drive results with it. And that's kind of what I'm building. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, Sanjay.
Yeah, I'm going to start at the end now.
Oh.
If you look at 2025, right, maybe what's that one surprising insight, positive or negative, that you're like, as I approach 2026, I need to really think about this. What would that be?
Well, I'm a tech guy, so I'll geek out here just for a second. Google really did a lot of research and announced a lot of research in Q1 of 2025. Some of that has come to fruition towards the tail end of 2025, and as we enter into 26, things like Gemini 3 and anti-gravity and some of the things that they've released. I'll talk a little bit more about A2UI and speech to retrieval and some of the things that I'm using to build with. But the surprising thing to me was something called memory folding, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. And that's really around how to manage context, and that's critically important when you're setting a narrative arc and you're using conversations to build experiences.
Yeah, remember that term context. In the past, you heard about prompt engineering. There's something called context engineering, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that. Go ahead, Jake.
So one insight from 2025, yes?
Yes.
So one major insight from 2025 is the vastness of blue ocean that was introduced from the LLM. Yeah? So, I mean, there was just so much that was capable. There's just so much out there that we're going to continuously attempt to learn and attempt to employ. So that was one key feature of all of 2025. And then going back on outcomes and being precise and executing, that's what 2026 is going to be about. What all did we get our hands on in all this vastness of blue ocean, and who are the individuals who actually utilize that time correctly? So 2025 was how much can we learn, how much can we get our hands on, how much can we try to employ and use. Now 2026 is defining and executing and outcomes. So.
Yep, that's great. Dan, you're 2025 insight.
Yeah, same. I think like, we're in 2025, it's about, exposure to a lot of the AI, about the hype. Now we're moving from the AI that talks to the AI that does,
Yeah.
right? This year is about agentic AI, about AI that do things, can operate, right? Not just talking, no more chatbot, right? So it's over, right? All these consulting company that are telling you I'm going to build your AI and just giving you like chatbot, it's just BS, What can it do for my operation? What can it do, right? That AI that do things for my business is going to be more important.
Yeah, at least for me, my 2025 insight, I think before the show we talked about, it's all about ROI. It's like, I built in this podcast and at least a foundation in 2025, but now it's about what do I do to monetize this in terms of, sponsorships, figuring out different ways of monetization on YouTube, different ways to actually generate the revenue. Enough of this. It's not a science fair project anymore, right? And my wife's in the audience, and there's so it's definitely not a science fair project anymore. So, but those are important. And so, as we're building these companies, right, it's good to talk about these ideas and once you launch, right? But what do you see as Dan? What do you see as the key strategies to grow and scale a company going to 2026?
Yeah, well, like if we're looking at like services as a software concept, right? Imagine today we're putting people to fulfill a role, to fulfill a job, to get things done, right? But there's a limit into how many people you can feed into that operation because there's a learning curve. There's a limit into how long people can work, right? And then, to scale that up is pretty hard. So that's where I think, agentic AI and then services as software, come in, where we can complement human. The same amount of people can do more work. Imagine now you have AI agents, running around doing so many things inside your operation, and then you have human who's almost like a coach, advisor, or a validator. Are you validating those results? So now you can do more with less, right? And that's, I think, what is really matter at the end. Is to looking how we're adapting technology to improve our operation, that we can do more with less.
Yeah, I think, if we watch the news, whether globally or here in the US, you see thousands of layoffs. I mean, Amazon just launched another round, 16,000. It's not all AI related, but, we have to figure this out. I think we can't always think about, employers can't think, oh, how do I just 10x reduce my workforce, right? I think that's a bad mentality. I think one thing is, okay, where it makes sense, how can we, maybe we can't hire 10x, but what can we do to get a 10x outcome from our employees to make them have a better work environment, better work-life balance, right? And they're not adding more hours. But then also, are there ways to decrease the cost where they're doing less manual work and more creative and more value-oriented work, right? I think that has to be the shift in mentality in that. In terms of Jake growing and scaling, especially in 2026, what do you see? Especially you're coming from an investor perspective. How do you measure that?
There's two ways. So, I just wanted to talk about getting in first and then the growth side. The getting in first is always how do we actually place ourselves into that pain point of the customer. So you have to master one of their workflows. I want to talk about ROI and efficiency. I don't want to talk about too much fluff and strategy. It's not about high-level strategy, even in your AI deck, or even when you go to enterprise and you're trying to make that. You want to isolate one of their heaviest pain points, and you want to involve yourself there, and you want to be the one that everybody else turns to, and you were the one who mastered that. That's how you go 0 to 1. So then you involve yourself on that pain point, and you've kind of figured it out agentically, and you've serviced this. And then you talk about growth. So growth is when you figure out distribution, and distribution is another major topic that we're going to talk about here, and also 2026 is going to be all about this. So distribution can play in a simple system integrated into the enterprise side, as in the CRM, as in the financial stack, the full software the dev team. If you are integrated in them and you are as frictionless as possible, and they all are turning back to you, and there's no recourse for that, that's how you really grow. So that's the growth factor. The distribution channel is huge from an investor standpoint, because now you're talking about, are you influential on the enterprise? Okay, the enterprise moves into government. And then the government moves into a large cultural sense. For the full Middle East, if they see you as the individual, as the company, now your TAMs and everything just grows. So functionally, from the beginning, master one workflow, get it completed. That's how you get 0 to 1. Then you have to start going expansion from there, and then distribution is going to involve much more, but you have to master the first, then you have to embed, and then you can expand.
Right, I think we'll probably get this in the sales and marketing. Is that, have you identified a pain point, the key bottleneck? Are you solving something in a practical way? Figure that out, iterate, and then boom, scale, right? And then you got to distribute it into a mass level to get that return on investment. You know, Steve, you're building, right, as a founder, right? So what's your perspective on that? I know you're not at the scale yet, but you have to have that mindset from you have to architect it from the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I use something called the Lean Business Canvas, and I'm a faith-based founder, and I learned this at an organization called Canna Global. And really what it is 9 elements on a canvas, starting with problem, solution fit, product market fit. How do you segment customers, right? What's your pipeline look like? How do you create demand? How do you nurture leads? Like, what's your close rate? How many meetings do you need with a particular customer? Like, all that stuff is on this sort of lean business canvas. And it's a really great way to kind of frame how you would go to market, whether or not your message and product market fit versus problem solution fit is really resonating with your customers, right? So that's kind of how I think about it in terms of being a startup founder. I want to go back to like a point you made, Sanjay. You know, there was, not to be, I mean, there's layoffs that happen all the time, but the way I think about layoffs, or the way a company really should think about layoffs, isn't necessarily about kind of removing cost out of the equation. I think of it more of an opportunity. So if a company is smart about how they manage their staff, they're thinking about the context and the rationale, not what's in a slide deck. So, you know, you got this great product, you're at company XYZ, you want to get the product out in a market, you put together all these decks, how to operationalize the product, how to secure funding within the enterprise, and kind of champion it through all the governance. And, you know, all that stuff's in a deck. But what about the context? What about all the stuff that happened around each of those gates and the decisions that were made that really provide the context into why and the rationale at any snapshot in time within an enterprise? To me, that's where 2026 is going to evolve, right? So how do you take all of the context of the things you're working on in an organization and create knowledge, create insight from that? I think that is really kind of a telling sign for where we are right now and where companies like, you know, all of the big tech, right, are going to grow. They're going to be gravitating towards this and leveraging this to make pragmatic, efficient staffing gains and business gains in the market.
Great. Yeah. You know, first of all, gentlemen, thanks for helping kick off the show. You know, we kind of jumped into it. That's the way we work on the podcast. But let's take a step back. We can breathe. You know. So let's talk about maybe. Obviously, we want to give the full background, just an executive summary, because we're in front of executives, right? So. You know, your foray into AI, we'll start with you, Jake. Your foray into AI and what you're focused on in 2026.
So foray into AI, how do I begin?
Yeah. Just a little background, and then now how you got into what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you and I share a degree at UT together. So AI and ML. I saw your background and noticed that we are sharing. In
I'm an Aggie, but I got a certification from UT.
I don't want to So for me, I'm not sure if that's even on or if this is working, but
roll with it, man.
Good. Okay. Either way, yeah. So getting into it, I had always noticed that it's always about first principles in anything you do, and this is why AI to me is the great equalizer. I always believe that you can't really efficiently build automation or build workflows until you really understand foundationally what that is that you are actually building on. So a lot of people actually mistake that. They accelerate chaos, is what I like to say. You have a major or a prototypical smaller problem, and then you put a workflow on that. Now you just accelerated it into chaos. So it's difficult to find the individuals that really understand that, and the people that do understand that are the people that are winning right now in 2026. So that's foundationally, how I got into it was just understanding that, this is the one component that can make it so every company, every individual, every funder, every founder, everybody, they can compete now because there's nothing that is bottlenecking. There's nothing that is precluding them from being the individual, the company, or the enterprise that they are truly destined to be. Now, what it was.
Now about Crowley, you can tell me about your role with Crowley Investments and what you're focused on 2026.
Yeah, so I guess that'll go really hand in hand. So what we normally do, it is in the kind of calibers that I've spoke of with the deep tech, fintech, health tech, and prop tech, but the individuals that we are backing are those individuals that are going to be the 1% of their industry and of what they're involving themselves with. The reason that we do that is because if you back somebody who is already at that standard and then you push that industry up in that way, you've created a new standard, and the entire industry now has to follow along, or else they will side to the bottom. So that's why we really back those type of founders and those individuals. We see the world in a very specific way, and everybody can realize this in the new world. But that's kind of what we get involved with as far as the AI sense goes. And that's what I believe, if you're truly going to grow in the best way, it always starts foundationally. Everybody gets confused that we have to try to make our current system work, go back to first principles, go back to those 5 steps that are going to really be impactful. Then we can figure out how to build past that. So.
Yeah, I think also one thing you said too, people forget, they think AI is a magic button is going to solve everything. But if you're already losing $1 and you replicate that 1 million times, now you've just $1 million, right? So, so make sure, going back to first principles, right? And one thing I'm curious about, you mentioned in passing, we'll talk, you said you're from Austin, and you're here in Dallas meeting with a hedge fund. I'm curious about that. So tell us a little bit about that if you can.
Sure, I won't go into the very specifics, but a lot of our meetings. Obviously, I talked about the founders that we'd like to back, but that just goes directly into individuals that are hedge fund managers or their family offices. What are they usually doing? They're defining the alpha that they can create. So I meet with hedge fund managers to figure out what is that. Can we involve ourselves in that side too? It's not just the fund that I operate; it is within those type of groups. So really understanding from a level that the individual founders are getting to, but also at the highest level, how can I branch that conversation? How are these individuals delivering at this velocity and at this type of a new agency? And then how do I characterize that into the workflows that we get involved with? So that's what a lot of that overlap is. And that's why I think, we talked about right from the beginning how this particular area in the world has a great opportunity to raise and compete against Silicon Valley. It's because of those individuals that are here, and it's because of their community feel that they're giving back. They're employing people like myself to go figure out what's the strategy and how do we holistically do this as a community. So,
all right, appreciate that. And Steve, you're a builder, right? So tell us a little about how you got here and what you're building.
So snapshot 1 is probably voice tech way back, around say 2000, IVRs, collectors. Then it went to in-vehicle services, telematics, and things like that, usage-based insurance. And I've got say 20, 25 years, dare I say, in the automotive space. So I've seen a lot of stuff. So when Gen AI, when the horse left the barn and ChatGPT 3, I think it was, came out, there was a ton of hype, right? Everybody was, oh, wow. I took a look at that and I said, there's a really pragmatic way of using this. And I've got some other cool tech in my background. I'm going to take a look at building a company number 1, around this tech, and I focused on healthcare first, right? So that's where the patent came from. That's where a lot of the intellectual property arose from. And I've taken that and built something really unique and bespoke with Lone Star Ascent that really focuses more on experiences, right? And I think that's resonating extremely well in 2026. So that's sort of like a very high-level, broad-brush view of how I got into the space and where I focus my efforts on.
Yeah, when we get to the technology section, we'll talk about it. Actually, Steve is on my next episode that's coming out, and he's going to it's actually about curating a multimodal experience. So we're talking about text, voice, video, really a integrated experience, right? All right, Dan, tell us a little bit. Most people here know you, but there's a lot of folks that don't know you, right? So
everybody knows
audience.
Dan.
At some point, everybody will know Dan, but go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, well, now that I have 2 companies, I'll start off first with, how I got into like AI world. right? I've been doing, like I study business information system, so I kind of know both world, business and IT. I work for a big Japanese company called NTT Data now, right? And back then, our main focus was really solving business problem. We've been talking about selling the outcome before we even talk about outcome like today, right? It's always been focusing on business. So when when all these AI boom happening, we already been doing like virtual chatbots 10 years back, right? It's still all, machine learning, we've been involved in like AI, ML for a long time. But, with this new age of Gen AI revolution happen, then, myself and my co-founder, CTO, who's been an expert in AI, ML for his whole life, like he's got 11 patents under his name, wrote a bunch of white paper, but we saw a flaw that everybody are trying to adopting technologies. But what we see in AI, it's actually 95% business. AI is 95% business, 5% technologies, right? People are going at it the wrong way. So that's why I decided, okay, then we need to fill that gap. So I created an AI consulting firm called AI Connex, where now we've been working with big automotive company. We just signed a contract with private equity firm to help them build an AI that do due diligence, measuring cash flow, doing many different things for, it's got, SaaS is dead in a way, right? That software as a service is gonna shrink down so much, and the service as a software will grow. And because everybody need to build now. With AI, you can build things, it's gonna be a hybrid combination of a little bit of SaaS, but then you're gonna build a lot. You're gonna need to customize things to make it work, like you said. Now you have to go back and look at your business. Your small company can scale even better, right? Big company, of course, they're gonna cut people. I don't want to lie, I mean, AI will help them, reduce a lot of costs. But for a lot of medium to smaller company, this is perfect time for you, right? Because it's the time that you can compete with those big companies. You can maybe even grow bigger than them because you have all these, AI workforce, right? And the key thing is really to understand measuring your problem, like quantifying the problem. I think I see the most problem people can't do is how big impact is the problem. Like you're saying, like the workflow, but how much impact is that workflow? Can you quantify that for me? A lot of time I talk to my customer, they can't quantify that. If you can't quantify that, there's no value in building anything, right? And if your operation and process sucks, like Sanjay said, you're only gonna produce more crappy result. AI will generate more crappy result, right?
Faster.
Is that what you want? Faster.
Sloppier slop.
Yeah. Losing more money, right? So all this kind of problem. That's why I started this, and then we've been successful. Think of ourselves kind of like a mini Palantir in a way. Palantir has their platform, but at the end they do a lot of customization or customized AI projects, and because that's the only way you deliver real outcome and successful productivity to your customer. Then I met my partner, who's the co-founder and the general partner of this big VC firm, like about a year and a half ago here, through some event, like at Plug and Play or Google event and so on, right? He's from an investor standpoint, I'm from founder standpoint, and we saw the gap in the market. Again, I love fulfilling the gap. I like finding the gap in the market. We saw the gap that in Dallas, in Texas, it's such an amazing market, but no one is really doing anything right here. Like, a lot of the founders here are great builder. People in San Francisco, Silicon Valley are great formal founder, but they're great technology founder too, but a lot that are, that are outside of those, they're great at FOMOing. They get great at talking a story, right, and getting the fundraise. But people here are great at building things, but are not great at talking and telling the story. So, and we don't even know how to vet who's the real investor and the fake investor. There's so many investors here that are saying they're investor, they're VC, but they have no fund. So how do you even vet them, right? You know, like, so we decide like, okay, so we just create this community where it's just a community. The most basic thing that we don't even have here in DFW is a community of founder, investor, and family offices who want to invest, but they don't know who's real and who's not. So we created this community where we openly talk. You know, if that investor who, you know, Sanjay or Victor talk to are not real, our community know, you know, just simple things like that we don't even have. So that's how I got into AI. Then now I got into kind of VC world as well.
I know you're part of AI Connex. I don't know if you can say it or not, but you signed a big contract and you're looking to hire people, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, again, if we're hitting the right like point in customer business, there's a lot of opportunity in there, right?
Yep.
People want to build, like I said, it's no more buy or build, it's only built,
Yep.
right? So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for like a consulting company that solves specific problem.
Yep.
Like we really focus a lot on construction, manufacturing, logistics, private equity. You know, we don't even want to go into like big financial services world. It's too much regulation, bureaucracy. I don't want to go into much in healthcare, a lot of red tapes. You know, so we wanted to be niche and solve real problems.
Right, and just a quick about me. Like I said, I have 30 years of corporate experience. I said I need to figure out this AI thing, start an AI consulting business. Someone reached out to me about a podcast, and I said, why don't I give back? I'm sure there's other people like me that are trying to figure out this AI space. Let me invite the founders, the builders, the investors, people who are actually building. Let's share their journey and share their insights. And if I get 27 views, I'm done. Okay, hey, we're like a year later, 3 million views on YouTube and a live audience. So kudos to all you guys for this. but here's the important thing about community. 6 months ago, I said, hey, I got this great idea. I should do a live event. I talked to a lot of people. I think they kind of blew me off, and some people tried to do their own thing. And then talking to Dan, and I had joined VC Arena, so talking about community. And look, and we make this happen. 2026 is about reality and results. You want to surround yourself with good people. They're going to help you get to those results, and that's what we want to focus on. So, you know, typically we talk about AI from a technology perspective. Let's take a step back. One thing for me is vision, mindset, strategy. So we'll start with you, Dan. From a vision, mindset, strategy, what's critical you think for 2026?
Well, I think there's two ways, right? One for startup founders, and then one for like corporate. You know, for the startup founder, I would say, you know, this AI hype is one thing, but then telling the story is going to be more important. Like, you know, telling not the convincing but relatable story. I take an example of company like Crowley, right? I don't know, you guys know Crowley, the AI that helps you cheat on everything. Super simple, right? One tagline, you know exactly what they do, right? Most people that are starting their AI startup or in any startup or any company are too complicated. They can't even explain in one sentence or in 10 seconds, 30 seconds what they do, what value they bring. That's the pitfall, right? You know, we're too much focused on solution or technology thing and not thinking from a customer standpoint, right? Being able to, you know, telling the story that resonate with people, virality will become a product. You know, how you leveraging social media or, you know, getting the right message out that resonating with people. That's why I said virality. Virality is a product, especially for founder, for startup company, right? Or even nonprofit. How do you get your message out? How can it resonate in like quick second? Because people have so small attention now. Everybody like get brainwashed by TikTok, you know? All we have is 10 second, 30 second
Did
now.
you say something, Dan?
Right? So it's a market of, you know, it's a day trade attention. There's a book called Day Trade Attention by Gary Vee that's I highly recommend. You know, so it's that virality and, you know, getting people attention quickly, getting a clear message out. So I think that would be the key.
Jake, whether it's from an investor perspective or even from your own business perspective, what do you think from a vision, mindset, strategy?
Yeah, vision, mindset, strategy always goes back to the first principles that we kind of talked about. So I just want to always start there. That's how you first get started and how you actually mobilize and how you're able to go and begin the journey. But then virality is a great one. there's always just this overhanging strategy of the story. Storytelling can become, obviously, with what your product is going to be, introduce it to different individuals. But you have to be comfortable, if it's a small, medium-sized business, or if it's a large business, the comfortability of your story has to be with who you are as a leader. You're telling a story of what you're executing on, why is it your passion, and why are the individuals that are a part of your team, why do they need to be passionate about this? That is probably the largest story that people absolutely forget. These 5 to 6 individuals that are taking up their time to really build something that's really going to push the standard, they have to believe it as much as you do. So you have to actively be able to tell that story to them, and they have to ingrain themselves with you. The third part about this is your software dev team has to have utility to be creative. Now that we have this layer and we understand the process and we have this foundation, for our software dev team to have a little matrix where, of course, we have the North Star, and that's why I really want to start this with a storyteller and a leader. A leader has to have the North Star and has to know exactly where the company is going. But then the dev team can actually take it upon themselves to have these small mini projects in there. And now that we have all of these iterations, we have this great power enter to our company. We can co-create and we can make projects, and then we can actually enhance the company. And what's the biggest thing that everybody likes to do? They like to have a pride in what they're outputting. So you're outputting enter to a company, and then the company is moving up. So that's a huge strategy mindset that's going to separate a lot of people. Very difficult to employ because, again, at the very beginning, you had to have a great leader. A great leader has to tell a story to each one of the individuals, and then has to get those people enthused every day to go do that, execute. But that's a tough one, but it's a
Yeah, yeah. Great. Steve?
So, not to be a broken record, but it's really about the experience. And the way I think about creating an experience is drafting a narrative arc, right? So how do I want this experience to begin? What kind of information do I need to collect as the experience is unfolding to add relationship depth and immersiveness to what's unfolding in front of the customer? So, I'm obviously a builder. I think along the lines of not only creating, but being very pragmatic about what I'm creating and bringing those around with me. I'm the kind of guy that likes to let people have free reign. So when I'm working with developers or, my product folks, I kind of give them that narrative arc, or I give them an objective, and I let them go off and kind of do a little bit of research and come back, and then we kind of create in real time, right? There's a pragmatic side to this too. So it's not all about, rainbows and unicorns. You really have to figure out how you create value, not only for yourself, but for the customer. And if you think about cost plus, that's the wrong way to approach the market in 2026, right? You really have to manage your infrastructure costs and your inference costs if you're using AI. But it's not cost plus. It's really taking a percentage of the value you create for your customer and creating a win-win with your customer, understanding kind of what their pain points are in the customer's language, reinforcing the brand philosophy, right? Having the product experience tie into that brand, right? That brand promise in the journey, and creating value. That's kind of how I look at sort of the vision and the mindset, Sanjay. Hopefully that...
That's great. I think kind of summarize some of the things, and some of the things, I have some conversations, Kelly, who's in the audience, who's on a recent episode, some of us Gen Xers out there, right? We're in a different stage of our life. And, regardless of what stage of life you're in, and if you see a pain point out there, right, and you're passionate about it, figure out, okay, I want to solve this problem. And then you realize, wow, I have 15, 10, 20, 30 years of expertise. You have domain expertise. Take that pain point, take that passion, take your domain expertise, use AI, combine that, find the right people, and figure out what is that experience, what is that end result. People are not buying your consulting, they're not buying your AI, they're buying an experience or an expected result, right? And can you get to that in a meaningful way where they're like, I will gladly give you money to solve my problems, And that's what we got to get to. But one thing is, stories are great, and people talk a lot of stories, and that's vaporware. But so, and we have to get that story first, but then we have to actually build. So I'm going to start with you, Steve, from an AI, ML, tech stack, architecture, et cetera, right? How are you building this, what you're saying, a multimodal experience, right?
Yeah, so I'm actually hands-on keyboard cutting code, right? So I haven't built commercial software in, God, over 20 years. So it was a bit of a just take the jump in the pool sort of a thing, right? But I got to tell you, the tools out there, Cursor, Anti-Gravity, Claude Code, I mean, these things are great. And if you really have an understanding of how to build software, you don't need to surround yourself with a massive team. You only need a few people, right? You know, and you can leverage the technology to kind of get you to where you need to be. That's point number one, right? Point number two is it's all about, again, creating value and understanding, listening to customers, not necessarily trying to pitch or sell. I try to solve, right? I try to listen and really get an understanding of where the customer's pain points are, what they're dealing with, how they're measuring it, what they use for workarounds, right? And this is usually how I get the second or third meeting, right? I'm really like listening and parroting back and making sure that I understand where they're coming from. And then I start presenting, hey, this is what I'm building. Here's how it could really add some value. You talked about X, Y, Z. Here's how I'm going to solve that, right? And not only solve that, but I'm going to create an experience that's going to drive additional revenue, compound, right, the profit that you're making. That's how I think about, you know, building cool stuff and going to market.
And so, like in the episode, we talked about, say there's a jewelry store owner, right?
Yeah.
And they have their traditional luxury experience, and that's an experience, but a lot of times when you go to these websites, it's not a luxury experience, right?
No.
So how are you introducing, maybe at a high level, you know, voice, imagery, video generation, LLMs
Sure.
into that? So for the audience that's a little bit hungry for some of the tech stuff, you know?
So I open a voice channel, right? You can land a call, you can open a voice channel, however you want to do it. The first thing that I look for is customer intent. So what motivated that person to call or open a voice channel? I grab that intent within, you know, usually they stream it out, you know, in 1 or 2 sentences, and I stream that. And by the time they're done speaking, I really have a good understanding of why they're calling, what the intent is. Usually there's some context around that I wrap. And that's where I start the narrative arc, right? That's sort of, call it state one, right? And I manage states throughout this narrative arc, throughout this conversation, where I allow customers to either use voice or I push a visual experience to your phone. And you can gesture on your phone, you could speak. If you're looking for like a premium, you know, piece of jewelry or something like this, right? So, you know, for the ultra luxury, you know, like a Louis Vuitton or a Chanel or, you know, any of those really like big premium brands, there's a certain kind of expectation around white glove service that, you know, the consumers are looking for, right? And it's really around understanding the philosophy of asking questions and a little bit of neural marketing, right? To kind of draw some of that context out in the conversation as it's happening and use that to create depth in the narrative arc that I spawned from state number one, right? And I'm using a lot of tech to do this. I'm using like, Google released a protocol in the mid-December last year called A2UI, which is agent to UI, and it's really a unique way of having an agent control not only the voice, but the visuals of what you're seeing. So you can actually tie together, like say the oversimplified way of thinking about this is like a 10-word summary, but you get like 20 or 30 words on your phone. So you're hearing something in summary, you're getting the detail on your phone, and you're synthesizing kind of what your next question is or how you want to use that information, right? And that's where the depth of the conversation comes in. Not only do you build like relationship depth with the customer through this process, but you create an emotional anchor for them so that when they come back, their expectations from that last visit are there, right? And you build upon that.
Yeah, I think also what you talked about there too is, say they have a question about color clarity or this is slightly yellow, they can interact and get answers, et cetera. If they need to book they want to talk to the jewelry store owner, or I think the key thing is the abandoned cart, abandoned cart. You're trying to make sure that people don't abandon the cart and that actually the revenue is getting there.
Yeah,
right?
so there's a couple of ways of looking at it. So bridging the digital to physical gap, as you're talking about, Sanjay, is one way, right? So like for these ultra white glove experiences, typically these folks have like an in-store concierge, right, where they go for fittings or, you know, they try in the jewelry, they you know, make choices or selections. They maybe, you know, want to have it customized or make it unique in some way, shape, or form. You know, part of the narrative arc or part of the experience in this particular case would be to kind of guide them along that curated process, right? So like show them a couple of collections, or at least understand kind of what collections that persona kind of gravitates towards, right? So you're using a little bit of like, vector similarity, right, based on their persona to kind of guide them into the right direction, right? And that kind of bridges the gap between what you would see in a store with a concierge, and to be able to have that digitally, right? And then you could do this a couple of times based, you could run a couple of conversations, throw things in your vault, and say, yeah, I want to come in 12:30 on Tuesday, and I want to have my concierge look at the stuff in my vault, and we'll I'll try them all. We'll make it unique, and that's kind of how it's a very oversimplified way, but that's basically what I do.
I think the net of it is how do we drive to that deeper immersive experience, right? Jake, I'll turn it to you from a tech perspective. How are you approaching this in 2026?
Yeah, I just want to be a little quicker. I don't want to be cognizant, but just to make sure because I can tell stories for a long time. But the major two things, and I love the way that he's building, because this is very important on the second part of what I'll bring up. So one, just the tech stack, if you're in LangChain and you have all of your agents working out, and then, they're revectorizing or they're recalibrating what those tokenization is, that's very important. If it's a model that happens to be recalibrated, the weights are too much, it's going to be expensive. You make sure that you have agents that are exploring that, they're seeing edge cases, and they're automatically utilizing the best weights, just to be a little bit more technical from the beginning. But the second part of what he's doing beautifully, and the piece that is missed, I see too much, is the data. So everybody, for the past 15 years, data is the new oil. However, everybody's missed the boat on crude oil is not valuable until you refine it.
Right.
So data and what we're doing here, whoever's building the refineries, that's where your true value is. So what he just explained there of accumulating the data, accumulating the right data, and then cleansing that and then using it for a user experience, that's the right way to do it. That's the only way to do it. So he's refined the oil.
Yep.
He's made it so you can put it in your car and the car will actually run. So that's going to be the main difference in how people come to market and how you actually drive that ROI that we've been speaking of the whole time.
Great, perfect. Dan?
Yeah, well, I would say that, the most important thing is to, rather than get down to the model and everything, is to build what I call a validation layer, right? That is your proprietary layer, right? Because model will change, there's new tools, whatever you have built today, 4 weeks later, it's gonna be brand new. You're gonna have to rebuild everything again. But what would stay is that validation layer. How can you validate the result, right? That's the most important for any company, either startup or enterprise, right? I tell customer all the time, don't worry too much about what's underneath. What you need to build, you can have some vendor to do it. You need to become an AI factory, right? You need to have that factory line running, but you're the one that making sure you're checking that quality, because you're the one with the domain expertise. You know what's right, what's good, what resonate with your customer, right? That's very important. And then, data is also, a lot of synthetic data is going to be more and more important, because you need to build both good data and bad data. You can't just always have good data and never had any exception cases, right? So really to have real life testing scenario. Again, it comes back down to that validation layer is super important. But then the most important thing is how you can do all of this seamlessly that your customer don't even know what's underneath. And that's the success of how to be the unicorn company, right? Some of the company that I talked to, like Bluecore, which is, I think they're going to be the next unicorn in blue collar worker. They built a platform that do AI hiring for blue collar worker. Imagine LinkedIn and Indeed for blue collar workers. Super simple, everything all by phone, because it's exactly what blue collar worker does. They have no PC, they don't even know how to type, right? All the interface is just by phone and text. So you need to really build something that seamlessly work for the people that are actually going to be using it. And I see another company that built exact same thing, and then when they show me how they do it, they're like, yeah, they got to go download this app. The person have to write something about what they do, like Angie, listen, all this. I'm like, oh my God, you think all these plumber are gonna be doing that? You know, like all this, you know, right? Like welder know how to even do that? Like they don't even remember their password, you know? Like, see, like, you know, it's just like this, you know, like a lot of the elite military, like people that are in Delta One Ops or something like that, they do the most fundamental thing seamlessly, like you don't even feel. But that's exactly, you know, how you want to build your startup. You have to do the most fundamental thing, so it's simple for your user that they don't even feel the frictions, right? Some of the investor, like my friend who invested, he wrote probably like one of the first 10 checks to Pinterest. He said he didn't even know what they do. But when they exited for over $1 billion, he made tons of money.
He knows what they do now.
He still doesn't know what they do.
Right. He just sees the zeros.
So, you know,
But that's the point. Like
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, the dumbest thing could make you money.
Yeah.
The smartest thing and the smartest founder may not make you the money. You know, because it's not always about that solution. It's about resonating and getting that right, you know, product market fit or solving the right problem for the right user. Right?
yeah, so when, you know, AI started artificial intelligence, they were trying to use machines to mimic the way humans reason and think and process things, right? So you had machine learning, and now we have generative AI and all these different things. I think the key things coming out of this is data fidelity, like, you know, streamlining operations, that experience, right? This is for a 30-second answer, you know, so what about the show today? Why'd y'all do this show for 2026? What was your motivation?
Supporting my friend.
All right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Of course, Sanjay, you really do something inspirational. I mean, it's incredible that you choose to give your time back to these individuals that are building. That's what you chose to do. So of course, I'll choose to show up for you.
Well, it wasn't really about me, guys, but go ahead. That wasn't my intent, but go ahead.
First click, first live show. I mean, you know, I'm here. So in all seriousness, Sanjay, the content that you produce, right, and what you have online, it's always insightful. I always watch, I always listen, I always engage. That's why I'm here.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. And so my point is this, is that we have folks here from Dallas, Austin, you know, Houston, hopefully people from around the world, and we're trying to build this community. And I want to bring, you know, we're going to do this on a monthly basis, have, you know, sessions like women in AI, healthcare, you know, supply chain, those different types of things. That's where we want to get to. Especially we want to make sure we talk about Playbook. So we'll keep these very short answers, maybe 30-second answers from a sales and marketing perspective. What's the one thing folks got to think about going to 2026? Dan?
Well, I think for sales and marketing, you know, really again, like I like what Steve is saying, you know, asking and listening. The best salespeople is actually engineer. You'd be surprised. The best salespeople are engineers because they don't go and sell things. They go and ask people, wanted to solve something, right? The best selling book that I ever read is called Spin Selling, S-P-I-N, right? Yeah, right?
Yeah,
It's
I've read
about
it.
how you're asking. It's not even about selling. It's about how you ask people question and get them to think so that the answer become theirs. Imagine the movie Inception, exactly like that. How do you ask the question, you plant the idea in their head so that the idea become theirs. When the idea is theirs, they will move the mountain and everything to buy that, you know.
Yeah, thanks. And Jake?
Yeah, I do think it is exactly that, asking the right question, understanding them best, and then involving yourself right at the pain point. You really, everybody makes the decisions, like you said, moving mountains. It's based off your emotional state. So if you understand, if you ask the right question, you really understand them, and their pain point is severe enough, they're going to make the decision off of that. And then I was talking about this earlier, but distribution is going to be everything. That's the real way of sales and marketing. Everybody's going to be at a very, I hate saying this, but commoditized sense. But if it is commoditized, then it is about distribution. It's about media that you actually own. It's about the publications that you are going to be involved with. So be very strategic on exactly what you place your brand in.
Yeah, my next question, Steve, is really about operations, right? I know you're still in the build phase. So I'll combine the sales and marketing and operations. As you're looking forward in 2026, from a streamlining operations, scaling, what are you looking at for 2026 in your playbook, right?
So obviously, I'm on the precipice of something relatively big that I'll be able to announce soon. I think that will sort of lay out 2026 in terms of what it's going to shape up to be. Operationally, obviously, I'm an experience-based company. Maybe I'm an experience-based guy. I don't know, but if you're the founder and you're the brand, I guess that experience is what needs to resonate. And when I talk to customers, the one thing that I find that resonates is asking the right question. And to kind of plug another book, there's a book called The Mom Test that I really like. M-O-M, your mother. And if you were to have a startup and you were to ask your mother, is this a good product to bring out to the market? Of course your mother's going to say, yeah, it's great, go. But it's really around understanding who your audience is and asking the right question, not only for clarity in terms of solving their problem, but for clarity in terms of, do you have the right message? Is it resonating with your customers or your ICP the right way? Right? Are you creating value? Does it lead to a second, third, fourth meeting where they want to learn more? Right? That's really what I'm looking at in terms of 2026. Sales, marketing, and operations, to me, it all kind of ties together.
Yeah, I think you got to find out what's working, what's not working, cut out the stuff that's not working, make it more efficient, et cetera, right? One of the things that we talk about, because I want to save time for Q&A, on every episode we talk about democratization as a separate question, and then ethical and responsible AI. But since we're running out on time, I'm going to combine this. We'll start with Dan. Democratization. How do we make AI is a great democratizer, but how do we broaden the tent, right? And then how do we balance AI innovation with ethical and responsible AI? So there's two different aspects, but I'll let you combine the answer.
I think it's all about education, right? Like a lot of enterprise, people are, already hearing and learning and doing things in AI all the time, but a lot of people overall still doesn't even know what AI can do for them. And that's why, we focused a lot on AI education. We've been doing a lot of AI training. We work with the state of Texas to actually provide free AI training through state funding to a lot of, enterprise under 100 employees. And we work with like Ben, my good friend here, Ben Gold. He's about to start a new company called AI Academy for All. That's exactly what it's going to be doing. And together with my nonprofit, which is AI Connex Outreach, where our mission is AI access for all. And we actually been already doing that with Hispanic community. We've been teaching AI to a lot of underrepresented community, because I think with just the access to an AI on a phone, the kids in underrepresented family and community can be as good as any kids in the world. And that's the power of AI that we need to democratize.
And you're also helping battered women too, so Jake?
Yeah, I really do want to just reflect on that point, because it is so important. I said this a little bit earlier, but it really is. It's the great equalizer. So democratizing this is a major passion of mine, but what we should be focused on. These individuals that normally haven't seen it or been able to kind of utilize it in the best standpoint, if they do, their ideas are bar none, because they really are approaching this with a virgin sense. They haven't kind of been in these industries or been in these large enterprises to be tainted, which is a great thing. So now they're coming at it with a fresh perspective and getting the equalizer. So that's one thing about the democratization. And then about the landscape of attempting to keep it on a guardrail, I think that's going to be up to legislation, unfortunately. Or fortunately, it depends on kind of what state you're in. But there's states that are leading in that, and they're making it a onus of them to set the tone and what that's going to look like. This sense of, is the hallucination, are we okay with hallucination? Are we outside of compliance because of hallucination? That's going to be a major marker, but I don't want to go too far into that.
All right.
Anybody remember when the first iPhone came out? Right, so there was life before iPhones, number one, right? So think about what the iPhone opened up for everybody in terms of connectivity and commercialization. Maybe that's not really the best way of thinking about it, but it really opened a massive door. So if you look at, like, take the Wayback Machine to like radio, television, internet, like the iPhone and, you know, the iStore and iTunes and all, like what that kind of opened up, social media. Now we have AI. So there are going to be kids born, right, with AI in their hands, right, as they were born. Like they wouldn't know a world before it. I think there's a huge opportunity, right, to tap in, to rethink about how we educate you know, our education system. How do we want to bring this technology into the next generation in a responsible and an ethical way? Not I forget the tech you were talking about, Dan, but not to like create cheat sheets, right? To get so they can like scam exams. I'm talking about like fundamentally shifting the education of how we nurture our kids, and in a way that's ethical, in a way that really kind of reimagines what we could do as a community.
Yeah, and I think I talked about why I started the show, but I found out sometimes when you start something, there's a hidden reason, maybe a reason for you to start the show, because I've had different guests on, you know, using living neurons instead of like NVIDIA processors for AI, right? And other folks that are building, and even one person said, yeah, we're building, but I'm not sure I'm thinking about the ethical part of it, you know, and we'll leave it to others. And maybe that's the reason is to raise the awareness. There's good things about AI. I'm not trying to raise alarm bells, but we have to build this responsibly. We have to do this together. We can't leave it to legislation. Do we really trust the politicians to figure this out? We have to figure this out, and we have to build it into our businesses, the governance models, the guardrails, et cetera. And the last thing I want to say too is there's so much coming out. It's overwhelming in terms of AI. So there's a term I've invented for myself called AI snacking. I don't have time 3 hours, 6 hours to go learn the next nana banana this or whatever, right? So for my podcast, for my business, if I have to solve a problem, I will go use an AI tool, an LLM tool, or figure out SEO, GEO for my podcast, spend 15 minutes, an hour, or 3 hours to actually get a result. And a lot of times AI will give you garbage, you know, because it's trying to give you clickbait or something, and you have to use your reasoning and ask it, you know, give me sources, whatever, but you have to challenge the AI to get a better result. But if you do it in a meaningful way, you will get a 10x result in 2026. So I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for helping me close this out. Start off to 2026 to build this, but I'm going to open up. Do we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience? Go ahead. Stefan, do we have a mic up here?
We need a microphone.
It's okay. Just go ahead. I'll repeat the question.
Thank you. Stefan Böhmer. Hi. I see a lot of startups talking about AI. Check. I see a lot of large corporations doing AI. They can't avoid missing it again. They were surprised by ChatGPT. Check. I see a lot of mid-sized companies questioning. Do we need to start? Where do we start? Why should we start now? Should we wait for a new model? What happens if we wait? Can you comment on that one?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I
You
can.
want to go ahead?
Or whoever. Yeah.
Just go ahead.
Yeah.
Go
Well, I
ahead,
think,
Jake.
yeah. Like if I go back to what I talk about, right? You know, everybody should start applying AI now because it really helps, especially small, medium enterprise. This is perfect timing, right? But you know, again, you can't just all do it yourself. You need to find a partner that can do. So there's an opportunity for a lot of like smaller consulting firms to come and help, right? And again, you know, building something that actually lasts for them, like that validation layer would remain because that's your domain experts, that's your enterprise knowledge. But the tools, it doesn't really matter. You know, building it the way that the tool is interchangeable. Vendor, you can eliminate vendor lock, right? Having that mechanism where you can, you know, always interchange things, that would be important. So really just finding the right consultant that can actually help you is going to be the
Jake,
key.
you want to?
Could you summarize the question again?
Yeah. Why should anybody use if they don't know why they should be using AI? Where do they get started? How should they get started, basically?
Oh yeah, so that's good. The ask that
Or if they should get started at all?
No, they absolutely should. So even how Sanjay just kind of formulated his opinion of exactly kind of how to this AI snacking. I like that a lot. So the snacking you should definitely take advantage of. There are so many new tools on a daily basis. So to get started is to just do. You have to operate, you have to do, and specifically do it to something that you enjoy. If it's daily communications, you're flooded in your inbox and you can't really keep track of them. create an AI agent for that, or really go out every single day, 3 hours I'm going to spend exactly on this. Okay, I was behind on Gmail, or I was behind on anybody that was trying to get a hold of me, and I created something for it, and now I'm ahead of the curve. Okay, now how do I keep applying that to other places in my life? But you absolutely do get started.
Yeah, one more question? Over there? Oh, well, that's two. I'll take two more. One, go ahead.
So, in terms of AI, what would you say the 3 core concepts you need to learn if you want to be an expert?
3 core concepts if you want to be an expert in AI.
Summarize.
You want to take this?
Sure. I'd say, first off, just have a conversation with it, like ChatGPT, Gemini. So I use ChatGPT for things where I want to write. I use Gemini for more like research. I use Claude for code, right? Do I use them all specifically for that? No. Like I could use Gemini for coding or what have you. So I would say just, dip your toe in the water with each of the models, get an understanding of what they are. The second thing is understand how to prompt, right? And know how to ask for what you want. If you ask for something really basic in like 4 words, that's kind of the answer you're going to get. You're not going to, if you ask for something very specific, if you tell it, you are a marketing intern, I want, a collateral piece and a 1-pager for this market, targeting this ICP, right? Like, so you have to be very specific with what you ask. And there's a lot of prompting guides out there. That would be the second thing. And then the third thing would be understand like a context window, or if you're using a large language model and you throw some documents in there, or if you're using like Google Notebook or something like that, right? That's a really cool way to throw a bunch of stuff in a notebook and then just start riffing on it, asking it questions. And you'll be very surprised based on what it answers. And it's sort of like peeling an onion. You get an answer and then you go, oh, okay, well, what about this? Or maybe if I ask a different way, I'll get, something a little bit more insightful. Right, and that's kind of the way to kind of sort of get ahead of, or think about how best to use 3 pieces of technology.
Yeah, and if I can summarize that, explore, experiment, when it's working, execute. And if you don't know how to use it, ask the GPT to make it better for you.
Right.
So one more question, last question, go ahead, microphone.
Oh, I was going to add just one more thing on his. So if you are using a chat model, the one thing you'll do is, so therapists get annoyed of this because they hear from couples that are having challenge between their relationships. Your ChatGPT or your Claude or anybody is going to answer it in your voice to make you happy. If you challenge the ChatGPT and you say, hey, I have goals for 10 years, I have goals for 5 years, and this is exactly what it is, please challenge me as much as I can. Don't give me the easiest answer. That's a great way to do it, because now you're actually working towards something that's giving you some good feedback rather than just fluff that it's designed to do.
And then maybe
All right,
I'll add one point.
We're out of time. Just
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, while we go to the microphone, add the point. So go ahead.
Counterpoint.
Can you give her the microphone? Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll just say one thing that you wanted to learn is ontology.
Yeah. Good point.
ONTOLOGY. That's the core of real AI. Ontology is how you build a knowledge that is no longer a data as a noun, is a data as a verb. In AI world, that's the most important thing. It's not a technology, it's a methodology. And for everybody here, that's the most important thing, is understanding how that knowledge working for AI, because that's the most important thing. It's data, logic, and action. That's exactly what Palantir does, and that's the most important thing in AI. So if you're gonna do anything, I would just highly recommend look up YouTube ontology and Palantir and how they use ontology in AI. That's exactly what you wanted to learn.
All right, question?
Yeah, I'll talk fast. I recently had the opportunity to hear the founder of Khan Academy speak, and he said something that really resonated with me, that the people who have good intentions have a responsibility to push AI forward so that we don't leave it in the hands of people who have nefarious intentions. So my question is, you as founders, investors, builders, how are you working to make sure that AI stays on the right side of history?
Yeah, I think the question is how,
That's a great one.
instead of leaving it to other people, how are we making sure that we're building AI in the right way? Well, this is one way I'm doing it, is through this podcast and having these conversations and making sure that we bring this up, and we're bringing it up now. And I'll let you guys go ahead.
Yeah, maybe
Anything
I'll
else?
just go. I think this is the right time, and it's perfect, right? I can't speak to everybody, but to me, this is the time where you can bridge innovation and humanity. Like then there's so many company that does that, but one of the company that I do like is Bluecore. They're not only a LinkedIn and Indeed platform for blue collar worker, but for the job seeker, you know what they do? They create an AI where people can call, and when they talk to AI for 15 minutes, it generates them resume for free. Imagine millions of resume can be created for free for all these blue collar workers that never had a resume before. Just that alone, we already went to like homeless shelter in downtown for women and children, and we showed them this. Within 15 minutes, we got 20 resume created, you know, and they never created one before. They don't even know how to type,
That's
for
amazing.
example. That's simple things like that. Creating something from nothing is what AI, you know, can be leveraged for.
Take anything.
I think Bluecore needs to pay for the sponsorship. One thing, you know, when you get involved as an investor, you can make a lot of decisions based off of capital. But one thing that I do is the individual founder or anybody that I back, they have to be moving society forward for me to even consider them. I will honestly say that. I have to see that they consciously have the efforts of everybody that is around the world and what is going to be serving of the best of that effort.
Yeah, real quick, I would, as a founder, I design systems with a focus, right? So I set up guardrails. If things hallucinate, if things go off the rails, if it's not ethical, not only am I losing money, my customers are losing money, and that begins, you know, a very ugly path. So from the very beginning, I use, you know, design principles, a narrow design focus, super fine tuning, managing context in memory. Like this, there's a bunch of principles you can apply to build something within guardrails that's ethically responsible. And that's literally a lot of what I focus my efforts on. The
Awesome.
experience, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, audience, for the wonderful question. And by the way, we have a beautiful audience, very diverse audience, and this is an amazing first event. I want to thank y'all. You know, you guys that are watching us virtually, thank you for joining us virtually from all around the world. But now, guess what? We'll have to sign off, but we're going to be hanging around here networking. We're going to have some sponsors coming up. So
Yeah.
in the future, come out to the live events. We're going to have some more in Dallas. Jake and I are looking at Austin. You know, hopefully we'll have some in Houston, et cetera, and maybe Silicon Valley, you never know, or India. So, you know,
Yeah.
hint, hint. So anyways, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the AI Space podcast. Please make sure to subscribe, share, sign up for notifications, and tell everyone about the show. See you all next time. Thanks a lot. All right, Corey. So we're going to go to the sponsorship section. I know some folks have to go to another